Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Horn Call podcast. My name is James Bolden, publications editor for the International Horn Society, and your host. I have a great conversation today with not one, but actually two guests, Dr. James Naigus and Dr. Drew Phillips, who I am pleased to work with on every issue of the Horn Call. These guys are the co-column editors of the Creative Hornist and Technique Tips, two very popular columns in the Horn Call. So if those names sound familiar, and if those particular column names sound familiar, that's why. I don't want to give away too much about our conversation today because I'll let the conversation speak for itself. But it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking with these guys about what it is that they do. They are incredibly creative, and this particular episode, I think, has a very nice relationship to the previous one, in which I talked to Jeffry Agrell from the University of Iowa. Both Dr. Naigus and Dr. Phillips studied with Professor Agrell at some point in their career. The preparations for the May issue of the Horn Call are all but complete. Everything is at the printer, and I think you're going to find, as always, a lot of really interesting and engaging content in the May 2021 issue of the Horn Call. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Drew Phillips and James Naigus.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Sure. Yeah. Again, my guests today are James Naigus and Drew Phillips. I don't know, you guys are a dynamic duo for certain, but you're the core moto duo. You have not one but two podcasts. You're both successful university teachers. Is there anything you guys don't do?
I'm not good at windsurfing.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
me either.
That's good. I was going to say that I don't play pickleball, but I actually started playing 2 weeks ago, so that was my one thing.
Come again? What's that?
Pickleball. It's like a cross between tennis and ping pong.
And
it's great.
A racquetball without a wall behind you. Like
I had no idea.
Very short court tennis.
Okay.
Very short. Yeah. It's a ton of fun.
Well, I'll have to check that out. I'm certainly, there's no shortage of time needing to be filled, especially as we're going into, when we're recording this just before what for most people in the United States will be our holiday break for public schools and universities, that sort of thing. So so guys, again, thank you so much for joining me today. I figure we can just talk about all different kinds of stuff. We'll kind of see where the conversation leads us. I can't promise that it will always be horn related, but I think it's always going to be interesting. I think we can agree upon that for sure.
We can always find a way to tie it back to horn.
I think so.
We'll try our best. Wherever
Even
we
if
go,
it's a
let's tie it
bicycle
back.
horn. Yeah,
that's right. Definitely. Well, I think let's start by maybe. I think you guys are, certainly well known through your various activities, through the horn and teaching. But maybe just talk a little bit about. Your columns in the Horn Call, how long you've been doing those columns, how you kind of came to that place of James, you do Creative Hornist, and Drew, you do Technique Tips, or is that vice versa, or do you switch back and forth?
Yeah, we actually switch back and forth every issue, unless we have something really specific we're talking about, in which sometimes we do the column together.
Right.
We trade off Technique Tips and Creative Hornist.
And it's just kind of depending on if we have a particular thing that we want to talk about that specifically relates to like a technical exercise, or if there's someone's doing a cool creative project with their studio, then we may just kind of juggle things around. But initially, I think one of the reasons why we both do this column is because our predecessor did the work of 1,000 people, and that was, of course, Jeff Agrell, who was, I think we've been doing this column for 3.5 years.
Did we start in 2017? That sounds right.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years. And
okay.
then,
well, it seems like longer though. But yeah, I mean,
maybe it was.
You guys seem like you're naturals
this past
at it.
Year, this past year seems like 1,000 years as well.
So. Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
But Jeff was the contributor for many, many years past, and he was our mutual teacher at University of Iowa. And that's where I met you, Drew.
Yeah, and that is where we formed our duo and where we started. I started writing originally for the first time. I'd never written music until that second year of my master's and your first year of your doctorate. And from that point, we just formed some of our creative ideas, and it led us to where we are.
Okay. Again, there's always that time lag between. So we're recording this, and I think I don't know exactly when it's gonna be released, but I think it will be certainly pertinent for the February issue. So you've got columns coming out in the February issue. Drew, yours is about stealing from other instruments, right? Like other repertoire, warm-ups, technique, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And sorry, go ahead, and then we'll get to James.
Oh no, it's about being a kleptomaniac. That's the main point of it, is that we should all go and rob each other. No, it's really not. It's about how I use different etude books and different music from friends that I've met over the years. Specifically, this column applies to etudes, studies, and literature that I use for improvement, but I've also stolen solos and other more flashy things from our other instrument friends, and how that's a really great resource to extend our capabilities.
No, I love that idea, and I one of the great things about being in the positions we're in is we get to hear lots of different kinds of music. We're not just listening to horn players. I get to hear other instruments play jury, so I get to hear a cool low brass piece that I might steal. All that kind of stuff. No, I love that column. Is there anything you want to tease in that column that you might point readers to really check out, if there's maybe a couple of things from it that they should check out?
I think I talk about different areas and fundamentals that I think we like to use other literature to improve. So when I talk about low horn playing, I identify several trombone etude books, like the Rochu, the Herring, the Blazevich studies for tuba, using that for extreme low. I talk about some high range stuff. I use some of the some violin etudes, some flute etudes, that kind of thing for that. But a lot of it is stolen from trumpet literature. I was listening to, and I remember from the first podcast, the interview you did with Andrew Pelletier, and he said he does a lot of arbans, or that was like his project over this whole summer. And that's, I know the arbans so well because I maybe people are aware I teach trumpet as well. I'm the horn and trumpet professor, so I steal from the trumpets all the time. I steal their arbans exercises, I steal their getchel, I steal everything to use. But those are the things that I think really stick out, is that a lot of it's still brass related, but there are a couple outliers, some flutes, some violin stuff.
Ooh, I love that. That's really cool. Yeah, we got to come back to the horn and trumpet thing in a few minutes. I made a note that we got to. I never miss a chance to rag on the trumpet players. So.
Oh yes. Well, they deserve it.
I'll tell you a funny story. That's something that. Maybe his name. I won't mention his name, but I'll tell you a funny joke that a former principal horn of a pretty major orchestra told me about trumpet sometime. Okay, so James, your column in this particular issue, the February 2021 issue, is about various activities that people did in your studio for in the fall at the University of Georgia, right? Ways to kind of deal with some of the distancing that had to happen, creative ways of building community and building in. It sounded like, based on these activities that your students and you were doing, that people were staying motivated. They were actually getting something musically out of this, in which by many accounts has kind of been a garbage semester for a lot of people. But it's heartening to me to see and to hear stories about people making some positive things come out of all this.
Yeah, I think one of the most kind of unique aspects of instrumental studios is that we have a much greater sense of community and family than at least my perception of other arts or even, sciences. Or you don't hear necessarily about physics majors, going to their professor's house and having studio parties, at least not that I'm aware of. So this sense of belonging and community and support is so important in the college experience, and the recent isolation and restrictions have really made that difficult. And so I put together a list of ideas and thoughts of ways of things that people can do, both from the perspective if you're a studio teacher, but also if you're a member of the studio, maybe activities that you can initiate. And two of the ideas were initiatives that were thought up and organized by two of my students, one involving a duet round robin project which paired people up. And so it gave them a chance to actually see each other in person, and doing it safely. They met outside, distanced, with bell covers and, per the regulations. But the goal was honestly for people to just chat and be social, with music being a secondary thing.
Mm-hmm. It's
That's
just the medium.
so
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And another project, which was a group warm-up, which, again, it just brought people together. It allowed people to just see each other and go, hey, you know what? I'm still here, and we're in this together, and let's get better while we're here. So we're all learning how to deal with this, right? And we're all trying to do what's best for our students. So hopefully some of the ideas in there, since February, we're still going to be in a very similar situation. I think some of the ideas are still pertinent, and then could be translated to just when we're not in, we don't have as many restrictions in place.
Right. And as much as we would like to think that, one day someone's going to snap their fingers and all this will just go away, I think it's going to be much more of a gradual tapering down of, as different states, revert to their different phases or whatever, and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's probably going to happen, in the way all human things do, kind of in a messy way, and it'll just eventually hopefully peter out. But no, I thought both you guys' columns were just really awesome. You both seem to be really creative, and really your mental gears seem to be moving all the time. So what keeps you inspired? How are you able to come up with all of these different ideas, and what keeps you motivated and churning up new things to new hoops for your students to jump through?
You want to go first, Drew? Or you want me to?
Go ahead. I'm thinking.
Okay. A lot of my articles are based on my students and inspired by my students, whether that be a technical exercise that I make up to help a student, or like in this case, a more just creative idea or creative project. I think focusing on that is much more interesting than just everything being necessarily about, well, this is what I did for me, and here's a piece that I'm writing. I mean, maybe some people find that interesting here and there, but for the most part, I know that I try to think about something that's a little bit more universally interesting and accessible and applicable, so that, someone who's a professional horn player or an amateur horn player can still get some use out of it. And so, we're all teachers here, and so I think we kind of have a similar mindset in terms of that being a priority.
I think exactly what James said is how a lot of my articles also come out, is it's based on what's happening in my studio at the time. And another place that I like to draw some of those articles from is a lot of times when James and I do our Complete Musician podcast. If you go back and look at some of our episodes and how they line up with the horn call, or when I write them a couple months before, you'll see they're very aligned. So I get some of those ideas, and then I text James and I go, hey, let's make a podcast about it. And he goes, all right. And then we, in those voices, and then we come together, and that's a good motivation as well for me to stay creative, is because I have a colleague who's creative, that we do creative things together, to give me some inspiration to write.
And on top of that too, I mean, I think so many people can get in the the trouble of doing a do as I say, don't do as I do type of mindset when it comes to teaching. And so I think that Drew and I both actively try to demonstrate what being creative looks like on a regular basis, just through our projects and through, these writing, these journal articles and things as well.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think you mentioning that, setting a good example. I think, all three of us studied with various professors who would certainly, we would put them in the category of being creative for sure. 100%. You both studied at some point in your careers with Jeff Agrell at the University of Iowa. I remember the first time I met Jeff, he came to University of Wisconsin because he's a former student of Doug Hill from way back in the day. We won't say how many years, but
but he was basically like one of Doug Hill's first students.
Yeah. You guys can do the math. But so I think this was my first semester of my master's there. So he came, and I had heard of Jeff as like the improv guy, and so he was going to come do like an improvisation masterclass. And I was like, I don't know how to play jazz. Well, that was the first area where I was wrong, because improvisation doesn't necessarily mean jazz. And so it was an amazing masterclass. It was like, and we did like one of the sound painting things at the end as part of the concert. It was really cool.
I truly think that Jeff Agrell has more hours in the day than any of us. I think he's some kind of wizard that has extended his day to 48 hours as opposed to the normal 24, because he constantly has ideas and just ideas. There were so many times that in my schooling I would walk by his office and we would just sit and talk and just spit out ideas about pedagogy and playing and technique and teaching and just all of these crazy things. I don't know how. I mean, he has such a very multifaceted career and skill sets. We mentioned now he's learning Norwegian, which, why not? I mean, he just should. We joked that it was so he could enjoy all his Norwegian soap operas, because that's something he might be interested in.
That's a real thing.
That wasn't a joke?
No, I think that's the Netflix Norwegian dramas.
That doesn't surprise me. But he just has the cogs are turning in his head all the time, and it baffles me how much. I just wonder how many calories he burns just from his brain working that much. I wish I had that power.
Maybe he just doesn't sleep, but yeah.
Maybe.
No,
that may be true.
You guys, the apple certainly hasn't fallen far from the tree. But I recall having this conversation with some other colleagues of mine about creativity, and I think a lot of times our students, they obviously recognize creativity in their teachers or when they look at artists that are well known and that are considered creative, but they don't understand how can they be creative? And I think it's important for them to understand, like, creativity takes so many different forms. Like, what's creativity for one person? If someone else tries to do that same thing, they might just end up beating their head against the wall. It's like, I think finding your own creative voice is really important. Finding that outlet or those outlets, if you're Jeff Agrell, the 57 different ways that you're creative. But for some people, they have like two things, but they're incredibly creative at those things. So, I think you both have done incredibly well at finding those places where your creativity can really grow.
It was only through Jeff and I cite James as well that I even started doing any composition kinds of things. So it was, like you said, the modeling of my teacher and fellow colleague that I started doing this. Otherwise, my creative ventures before I went to Iowa, I wouldn't say it was too vast, but that's why I treasure my time there so much, is because it gave me a lot more facets to my career.
And I think it's important too, as educators or as a student looking for a teacher, is to really find someone and to be the person that inspires that creativity. Like you said, James, it's it has to be fostered, it has to be encouraged. And that's one thing that can be dangerous about creativity, is that it can be so raw, especially when you're starting, like initial compositions and improvisations, and it's scary. And if that is shut down, or if you feel like you're afraid to make mistakes, that's the whole soapbox of why creativity is being taken out of younger music classrooms, and they're being squandered. They're being told they can't be creative, and then it sets them up for a difficult and uphill battle. But so it's getting students to just take that leap and just, say, well, I've never written anything. I can't write any music. It's like, well, have you tried? Have you done it? Have you allowed yourself to maybe not write a perfect symphony first and instead write a 4-bar melody and see how it goes? And maybe it's just the worst thing that anyone's ever written, but that's okay, because the next one will be better.
Our last Complete Musician podcast we recorded was about compositions during this whole period, because we haven't done one in a while, mostly because our other podcast was taking off. But our Complete Musician one, we talked about how, James, I hope you don't mind me saying that we both went through this like composition slump.
Oh, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, and the way we started doing anything, or the reason we started doing anything, was for fun. It was purely just for enjoyment in writing again. And for me, that took the form of an arrangement of something from a video game. I wrote one of my last Horn Call articles was on it about from the video game Paper Mario. I did a duet for 2 horns and piano because I loved the game, I loved the theme, and that was a way for me to just do something fun, because practicing motivation, I won't lie to you, was at an all-time low. There were no gigs. There was, at the moment, who knew if we were coming back to school to be in person or all online. And that spring semester, I think, for all of us was really hard, because we just weren't playing with each other. And it's just really hard to sit, at least for me, it's really hard to sit and do my co-prosh exercises when it feels like it's to no end. And at that point, I like to turn to, like you said, taking care of yourself and let's make this fun again. And that's where a lot of the compositions or things that we talk about in our last episode came from, is just pure enjoyment factor.
Well, I was going to say it's difficult for me to sit down and do my co-prosh exercises on a normal day, so
Ever.
especially if it's on the F side of the horn.
Yeah,
that's right. You like to do the Reynolds etudes. We know.
On the F
Those
side.
are your favorites.
Yeah.
Didn't you send me a picture of the Grinch holding the Reynolds etudes?
I did. I found a meme that had the Grinch holding those, because that's kind of because that's how difficult they are.
Somebody told me when obviously Vern Reynolds wrote those for his students at Eastman, like he would assign like 2 a week, and you basically had to come in with your 2 Reynolds etudes learned every week.
At tempo.
You mean a measure a week?
Yeah, right.
That sounds accomplishable. Maybe. Yeah,
that's those can be brutal for sure. Speaking about you guys' podcast, so you've mentioned the Complete Musician one. Now tell me about this other one. We were talking about it earlier before we started recording. It seems really interesting.
So we called it Drew and James Talk About Everything, because as we record the Complete Musician, I edit those. And if you've listened to that before, you know that one of my favorite things in the world is to edit in just a ton of sound effects and silly gags. And when we make fun of each other, I steal clips from movies and songs. I go nuts with it a little bit.
We
it's
got
sometimes
to that
a little
point,
too
too.
much. And
started off being a lot more straight-laced, and then
no one should ever listen to the first 3 episodes. Don't ever listen to the first 3 episodes, because they sound like robots. We sound like you just don't want to listen to it. And one of my favorite things about the Complete Musician when we record it is that we have a lot of banter in between, where we laugh at each other. We say something that I don't include, but we just have this back and forth conversations. And then when James and I talk in general, on Skype, or when we're playing video games or whatever, we just have these really interesting wayward conversations that kind of go all over the place. And we just thought, you know what, it would be kind of fun to just talk. Let's just have a podcast where we just have literally a stream of consciousness. So every time we record one of those, we just have this we don't even have a topic. We usually just come on, and we have never planned it. We come on and we just talk about what has happened, and then that story leads to another story, and it goes in all different directions until it's completely random. And we start everyone by saying, this is your conversation with your two best friends that you never knew you needed until now.
And, we started this in the summer, or maybe it was a little earlier than that. And, it makes you appreciate and cherish human connection. That sounds like something an alien would say. Appreciate human connection.
Right.
But really, we do this music thing, and that's great. But there's more to life than music. I hate to say this on a music podcast, but right, it's people.
Hey, that's, absolutely, yeah.
That's what makes the world go round. And so we wanted to have fun, and sometimes. Well, we also on the Complete Musician we had some specials, some like Christmas specials, and we made fake commercials. And
we recorded Christmas albums.
Yeah,
yes.
We're peripherally music. And so that kind of morphed into just, hey, let's do this thing because it's fun and no other reason. And I think that's a good way to live life.
I love that. Now, are your students have they caught on to your podcast? Do they talk about them, or do they mention episodes and things like that?
Every once in a while, the students, because we do tell them about it, and a lot of the Complete Musician ones are geared towards them, and we repost a certain, like our Christmas one, we repost every year because we recorded two Christmas albums, wasn't it, James? Or was it one?
No, it was.
We recorded
one. The Gigging Musicians Christmas album.
Yes.
And then we did a single,
12
which
days.
was the 12 Days of Finals.
Right, that was specifically for music students. So we post those every year. The 12 days of music students, right? And the other ones that we have are specifically geared towards things like, especially during COVID, we talked about how to take advantage of online lessons and how to do your best with that. We've talked about recording. We've talked about how to prepare for recitals. We talked with mini-series on performance anxiety. I did a little mini-series on teaching and pedagogy. So those are geared towards them, but I don't know if they've caught on to Drew and James talk about everything yet. Well, because to them it would be Dr. Naigus and Dr. Phillips talk about everything. So, to that, but I don't know if they've caught on to that one yet.
That one's not for them. That's just for us.
That's just for us. Yeah, that's for. But although I will tell you, random people have messaged me and said, "Oh yeah, I listen to your podcast when I run, like your Drew and James one," and I'm like, "Really? You listen to that as you run?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's just entertaining and random and fun to listen to."
I imagine you talking behind me, and it makes me run faster.
Right.
I'm trying to get away from you. Exactly.
No, it is such an interesting thing when our students begin to realize that we are also human, that we have a sense of humor, although it might be a little bit different than the average college students, but we find things funny. Sometimes we find the same things funny that they do, but maybe for different reasons. No, it's kind of nice when you can share those moments of, I'll mention a video game like Skyrim, and then it's like they were ignoring me before.
Hey, now we're talking.
Yeah, but then they realize, hey, this person lives in the same world we do, and they don't go sit in their little 6x6 cube and come out and teach lessons and classes
and eat saltines and stare at walls and drink water for the other 12 hours a day.
Yeah, no, right. Exactly.
Well, we're having next week our studio. We're having an Among Us party, which is a video game, right? It's a multiplayer online game. And so the students are like, "Oh, hey, we get to see how well Dr. Naigus can lie."
That sounds like so much fun. I know. I've talked to my students. We were actually planning before everything kind of fell apart in the spring semester. My students and I were planning to go to an escape room together.
Oh,
that would be such a good bonding experience. Yeah.
And exactly, because with me there, I know they'd all kind of watch what they were doing. But James and I are, we are undefeated escape room champions. Everyone should know that about us. I'm pretty sure we still put that in our bios at the end of our Horn Call articles.
Yeah, I think I've seen that somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, we are undefeated. currently. We won't mention how many we've done, but we are undefeated. And
it's more than one. It is a non-zero
It's
number.
definitely more than one. Yes, it is definitely several. It is not just like we've done one. No, we've done several. And every time we seem to very much surprise and shock the person that is working. And we have been told more than once that we solved it wrong and that we went too fast. That
I don't know how that's a thing.
I don't know how we come out of the room and the guy goes, "You did it wrong. You weren't supposed to do it. You did it too quickly." Anyway, so we were planning on doing that because you're right. The studio camaraderie thing is real, and we are more than just their teachers. A lot of times, we are people too. So
yeah, absolutely. One book I've been reading that we were talking about, Drew, you also teach high brass at your yes. university, so you interact with those other folks, those trumpet players. But all ragging aside, I've been reading this book by Whiff Rudd, who teaches at Baylor. It's called Side by Side. It's about building community in a private studio. I highly recommend it. It's just an incredible book. And I mean, there's very little talk of actual like trumpet pedagogy. It's all, universally applicable things if you're working with a group of young people and trying to, inspire them and motivate them and all those things we're supposed to do, but also have them buy into the whole thing, whatever that thing or things that you want your studio to be about. And it's different for every teacher and every studio and every institution, but the idea of them being a team, it's so important, especially now. I mean, when we're separated by distancing and not always getting to be close together in ensemble. So I highly recommend that book. It's called Side by Side by Whiff Rudd, and no, he did not pay me to say that. But yeah, it's an excellent book. So I got to ask you guys, what's the first thing you're going to do when this COVID stuff goes away? It's like, do you have your list of like, you're going to go out to eat, you're going to go, you mentioned an escape room.
Honestly, that would be pretty great to meet up and play around a golf and do an escape room.
Oh, we talked about doing that so much because we love to play golf together, and I would love to continue our escape room streak. That would be awesome.
Yeah. I would also, I love food, and there's so many restaurants in Athens that I still haven't tried yet. And, a lot of doing takeout, but it's not quite the same because then it gets cold, and, like, if you get French fries, they're soggy, and who wants soggy French fries, right?
Absolutely.
So going inside a restaurant. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people's answers, with their kids going back to school will be, take a nap. That sounds pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's funny, Drew, you mentioned the Mario thing. My son has gotten into that. So we're pulling out the old Super Nintendo. We got out the old Wii. It's making us feel, young-ish again, just watching him get into all the characters. It's really cool.
I am a huge Nintendo person, and I'm an even bigger Zelda fan, and all of my students know that. I have so many Zelda t-shirts and socks, and I'm a huge nerd of the series. One of our podcasts is dedicated to, I took the time to go through the entire game timeline and history, which James was very, very kind and let me babble at him for a very long time about that. But those games are so much fun and so good for, like you said, rediscovering your childhood, because the early games are really hard.
Oh my god,
they're really incredibly difficult.
Oh my god, you get when you're done, you're done. You get to the end of that level, and if you die, you have to start all over. Or if you're out of lives, you're done.
It's insane.
If you think about it, the original NES controller is, well, it's really a lot like Horn and the original NES, because, like you said, it's really difficult, and it has like 4 buttons, right?
Yeah.
So
it's unforgiving. Yeah,
right.
Very
Sometimes you want to throw it in the trash can.
Sometimes
like
it just
Horn.
breaks and you have no idea why. Exactly.
Take one day off and you forget how to play, just like Horn.
Oh my god, yeah. I was doing the thing where I was like moving the controller. It had been so long since I'd played a console game, but no, that's cool, guys. I think it might be cool too to talk about like a little bit of the technical side of things. Like, Drew, are you a Mac guy or a PC guy?
I am a Mac person.
Okay.
For now, yes.
Okay. James?
I'm PC.
PC. Oh, how did y'all get
Yeah.
together then? How does that world exist?
Well, eventually I'm going to go to the PC side because James has shown me the error of all things Apple, and
The Apple tax.
as I
think
sit here,
the
right,
Apple
and as I
showed it
sit
to
here
you.
with my iPhone, he has so many more programs that I just want, and I'm eventually going PC. But when your school has a surplus warehouse and they have a really good sale on an iMac that's like barely used and a year old, you go get it.
No, and it is
that's
true.
just-
Once you buy into that ecosystem, it's hard to get away from it. But
Well, although I did break my iMac and I did switch over to a Windows side, so I do have both sides on here.
okay,
So
what do you guys use for audio editing?
Pair of scissors
Ooh.
and some tape.
Nice.
yeah, there you
Just
go.
like old
Uh,
school.
yeah.
I kick it old school.
I use glue. He uses tape. I use glue. Now I record into Audacity or I record into Ableton, and then I've been using Reaper a bit. If it's not too difficult, actually, our podcasts are pretty easy to put together, so Audacity works
Well,
perfectly.
now they're easy to put together. When we started, we had so many edits and stops and goes
Oh,
that
man.
it took
It was
so
so
long
awkward.
to put together. But that's the thing, is that the more we did it, the more
Easier it got.
flow we got, and the less we had to stop and go. And then the time went into putting in all the silly sound effects and commercials and background music and everything.
I love it. It's so much fun to me. I know it's so like nerdy, but I love doing it.
Have you heard of Sound Bible? Have you been to
Oh,
that
yeah.
website? Yeah, yeah. It's just like stock, recordings of things. Yeah.
I actually used Sound Bible for a class project when I was teaching a class at Iowa called Creativity in Music. And one of the projects was an Audacity project where they had to make an entire piece using one sound. So you could manipulate that sound in any way, with pitch, rhythm, in time, slowing things, adding, just craziness, destroying the sound. And then the idea was just to do it in so many different ways that it would create an interesting kind of hodgepodge or hocket of sounds. And the sounds that people pulled from Sound Bible were quite creative.
Oh yeah, there's pretty much everything on there. Now I know, James, you've done some. I think you did like a live stream one time showing how you do like your multi-tracking and recording. Was there
Yeah.
a lot of interest in that? I would assume there was.
I don't know if there's a lot of interest. I think it's good skill to have, and I would say the multi-track recording, in terms of like recording, if you're recording quartets or octets with just yourself, I think there's been a lot of that more recently. Probably too much, honestly. Like you said, it was at the initial outset of this in March and April. Everyone felt like they needed to do this, even if they didn't want to. And that has since calmed down, but I think that's a thing that people are getting more comfortable with. The other stuff that I do is the kind of the composition using the DAW, the digital audio workstation. And so when I'm making pieces like the 3 fixed media pieces that I have, Sounding, Saga, and then the new piece, Visions, then I also use that piece of software, which I use a program called Sonar by Cakewalk.
Okay.
And it's similar to something like Reaper. I've used Sonar, or I've used Cakewalk products since like 2000 or 99, so I just kind of grandfathered into using this one a little bit. But it's similar to like Logic, Pro Tools, Ableton, GarageBand, any of those sequencer type of programs. And then I just integrate in the sound libraries where I can load up a patch and then play on my MIDI keyboard, and it records the sound that way. So that's been fun.
That's cool. No, I've found, with my students, we were talking about this before we started recording, that at least among a lot of my students, they realize that they need to know some technology, whether they're going to be a future band director or they're going to go the performance route. They realize that, hey, this technology of how to make music, how to produce music, it's a skill they need to know, but they don't really know quite how to go about it. They know that, like, for a lot of things, there's an app, and they can just download the app, and they hit the button, and it does that thing they need it to do. But there are some things that there really aren't apps, especially things that take like multiple steps to produce, to get a really fine recording of something, that there's not a single one-stop shop. You need multiple pieces of equipment usually, and you have to know how they all work together. What would be your suggestion for how students can start to educate themselves about that, besides listening to your podcast?
Right. I think I'm very close to where that is. A lot of my, not to, toot his own horn, haha, but a lot of my technological advice has come from James, because he does know so much more about it than I do. I would consider myself some kind of technical novice. I know the programs that I use and how to use them, but on the grand scheme of things, I'm actually feel like I'm still getting comfortable using a lot of other technological things. But I think that finding someone who will give you advice, and good advice, based on recordings and products that you see that you enjoy, or are high quality, is going to be the best place to turn, at least in terms of knowing what to use and what kind of equipment or products that you need. Like when I was buying my microphones, I'm using Audio-Technica. James gave me some options, but he said these are really good, and so that's what I got. And when I use my Focusrite that I plug it into, he told me to get that, so I trust his opinion, and that was what I went with.
That was your first mistake, trusting my opinion.
Well, you don't like laugh tracks in TV shows, so we can't trust it too much. So that's was my first thing, is I just got good advice from people, and then a lot of it was just experimentation with some of the pandemic stuff, and just getting away from recording a little. I started doing a lot more with video production. And that was really fun to download things like Premiere Pro for the Adobe Cloud, and work on putting videos together that were really interesting. Like I have one on my YouTube channel where I played the Saison Romance, but I accompanied myself on the piano, and I'm playing the horn and the piano at the same time. And that was a really fun little project just to get comfortable with it, which led to my local symphony hiring me to put together our educational concert that I got to do. So I got to get really comfortable really, really fast with that. But it was only through experimentation I got that. Like I said, I got advice from people that I trust, and then I just invented projects for myself to play around with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my experience, I had been a Mac person and used like the like Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro, and I'm trying to remember when I made the switch to the Adobe Creative Cloud, but I was just kind of running into some problems with like Final Cut. I mean, the interface, the user interface on all of those is very easy, but I was just running into some limitations, like things that I knew should be possible. It just wasn't letting me do it. I was like, well, I got to try this, Premiere Pro. And I remember when I opened the menu the first time, I was like, oh my God, this is. I don't know where to start. And so, I just started very slowly looking at the tutorial videos and all of that stuff. But yeah, there's pretty much a YouTube video for just about anything. Like that one thing you want to do, like I kept making my menus disappear. Like I would drag something, it would just go away. I was like, crap.
I still have that problem.
Yeah. And so there's a way to like gather the windows though, to reset it. And it was just like, okay, there was a YouTube video on that. I was like, okay, just click that and it goes back to.
Yes.
Right, for sure.
Absolutely.
Just avoid those YouTube videos that start with, hey guys, good to see you, and then they don't actually get into the content until 8.5 minutes later, after they've given all their sponsors.
The all caps clickbait titles?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. 10 easy hacks to make your microphone sound like a Neumann. I don't think anyone's made that video, but the difficult thing with technology is that it's expensive. I mean,
it is.
I remember as a student having to save my money just to pay my bills and pay my rent, and there was no money to spend on these luxury microphones and audio equipment, and I know that's a real difficult thing, because that's how you get into it, is getting good equipment. So my advice for students is to see if their universities have either recording classes or a recording department or technology department that either has equipment that they can loan out or that you can take a course on, or just maybe even there's ways to apply for grants for equipment for educational use. I don't think people should necessarily feel like they have to spend hundreds of dollars to kind of get their foot in the door. There's some cheaper options. I say cheaper, and it's still all expensive. But there's all-in-one, like Zoom, not related to the streaming platform, but the recording platform, microphones. There's some Samsung, or not Samsung, Samsung, and the Blue Yetis are pretty decent too, that are USB microphones. And then in terms of software, like you said, James, the Adobe suite, a lot of universities have licenses for those pieces of software, which on their own, I imagine that whole thing would cost thousands of dollars.
Yeah, the old Adobe Creative Suite was like, I think it was $4,000 or $5,000. Like, yeah. But then there wasn't a subscription, but it was like, because I remember doing the math, I was like, well, should I buy this subscription? The educator discount's pretty darn good to get the whole Creative Cloud if anybody's looking into that. But then I was like, is that worth it? Because then you kind of have to keep paying it, and it actually does. It is a better buy than like shelling out the several grand that the old standalone stuff was.
Right. And then the academic discount, that is a great tip for any piece of especially software. Is a lot of companies have academic, both as student and as teacher discounts, and oftentimes it's a 50% or more off, which when you're talking, like if you're getting Sibelius or Finale or something, you're saving hundreds of dollars, which makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the cost of like microphones and interfaces. It's like astronomical compared to what a college student can pay for things. And that was actually one of the things that turned me off from getting into it for a long time, because I'd worked with engineers and they're like, oh yeah, this is a $6,000 microphone. I'm like, okay, well, good for you, but and I was like, I can't explain that to the other person I share my household with, why I needed to spend that much money on a microphone.
The box your microphone came in costs more than my microphone.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But but that was because I was talking to people that this is their livelihood, is recording and engineering, but you really can get stuff that works pretty well for not nearly the amount that a professional engineer is spending on their equipment. Think of it like, you can get a horn that has all of the notes on it for a really small amount of money, but a discerning person that's a professional horn player, they're going to say, yeah, you don't want that horn. But in terms of, if you're a student, if you're just kind of getting into this, get the cheap stuff. It's going to be better than your phone most of the time,
And through post-production in so much of this, you can make things sound a lot better than they actually do. I'm constantly amazed with things like my iPad when I take video on that, at how good the microphone is on it and the input is. And when you go into your software and add some reverb and add some panning, it's amazing the quality that you can get with maybe not the best equipment.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here. I don't want to take too much of your time. Is there anything else you want to share with the listeners and talk about? Maybe how did you guys get into the IHS, and maybe just kind of to come full circle here and talk a little bit about the importance of the organization and why you think it's important. We talk about money for students. We look at that $25 a year for the electronic membership for students, and we think, well, gosh, that's not that much. But it obviously is for some people that, it might be a barrier to joining the IHS. But why do you think it's worth it to spend money to join this organization when there's so many other things they could spend their money on?
Sure. I think that for students, I think I also teach music ed classes here at my job, and purely for that reason, being a part of a professional organization is a huge advantage for any music ed student looking to apply to a job. They're always going to ask about that, about being a part of some professional organization, and IHS is. So there's that, I think, about not primarily, but just as a very technical, this will go on your resume, and this is part of the things that in some states are used for things like licensure, is it looks to see what affiliation you have with what group. So there's that. But also IHS, I mean, I joined back when I was in undergrad, and I remember going to my first conferences and just being so amazed at all things horn. Because when I went into undergrad, I was a naive little freshman that didn't have any idea about anything in the horn. I wanted to be a band director, and that was great. We need those great people. I never had, until later on, I did not even know that what I'm doing now is even possible. I'm so blessed to be able to do what I do. But it was so amazing to see so many people dedicated to this just love and enjoyment of the instrument. So I really think it is worth it purely for inspiration, for getting to know all of the people that we get to meet. We see now the whole social media presence of so many people like you doing this podcast, and so many other professors and professional players that are posting all of these amazing things. And suddenly you go to events like your conferences and your workshops and symposiums, and you see the people that did it, and you see the people you admire, and you go, you're a real person that I can talk to. It's not like some crazy Instagram person, influencer that you follow with 4.9 billion followers who, if you send a message to, they won't ever answer you. It's a real person that you walk up to and say, I enjoy your music. And they say, thank you, and learn your name. And then you're connected for life. So it's really cool to be a part of this organization because of the realness of the people you get to meet, and the admiration that you have and the inspiration that they give. Every one of the horn players that I've met in the IHS, I've just loved meeting, because I just, again, I'm so inspired by them, and they're real people. It's really great.
Yeah, you said it really well, Drew.
Perfect.
The workshops and the symposiums, and even the horn call itself, are really opportunities to be unapologetically a huge nerd. If you know what I mean. I mean, so we like horn, we play horn, people love horn, and for some reason, sometimes that can be looked down upon, and I'm not sure why, right? It's like,
who are those people?
Yeah, it's because it's people that don't have hobbies, and maybe they're, but so go to the workshops, read the articles, be curious, be excited, and that's okay. And that's why I think the workshops are so fun, is because you can go out and you can just try mouthpieces to your heart's content. And if you went normally and told your friend, like, I'm going to go try mouthpieces, they'd be like, what? But you do that to a horn player, and they're like, oh man, did you like the Lasky? Did you like what'd you like about this one? What cup, what rim shape did you? And that's cool, and that's great. And I think this is the community of the IHS, is that it's like-minded people that are all supportive in that same enthusiasm for the instrument. And that's the best kind of community to have. I think a lot of people will agree that horn players are some of the nicest people in the musical landscape. Maybe it's because we're biased, because we're horn players, but I genuinely think that in terms of support and being just genuinely good people, horn players are a breed of their own, and it's just a great community to be part of. So that's why I joined, and why I'm a lifetime member. I bit that bullet and got the lifetime membership, so I can always get the horn call, and I'll go to all the workshops.
Yeah, it's a tax write-off for sure.
Oh, now you tell me.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much. We could probably go for a lot longer, but thank you again for taking time out of your day to talk with me, and hope to talk to you again really soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure.